Ana Hashem, Ana Hashem, Hoshiana. Ana Hashem, Ana Hashem, Hatzlicha.
Bruchim Habaim, welcome friends. Today I've been studying the Parsha of this week, which is Parsha Vayiera, and specifically on the topic of the Akedah, the binding of Yitzhak. And going through my studies, I was actually reading a blog from an individual by the name of Dafe Tang. And I thought it was extraordinary, the connections he was making, the gematria, and the connections with Yitzhak and MASHIAC. And of course, this is not my own stuff, but it's just an absolutely wonderful, amazing teaching, and I thought I'd share it on my channel. And so, without further ado, he begins by quoting the verse in Bereshit chapter 22, verse 8, where it says, "And Abraham said, God will seek out for himself the lamb for the offering." And so, specifically the words God will seek out for himself, which is Elohim Yireh. Elohim Yireh, which can mean God will provide. Elohim Yireh, the name of God, Elohim, denoting judgment. And in verse 14, we read, and it says, "And Abraham called the name of that site Hashem Yireh, as it is said this day, on the mountain Hashem will be seen." And we see here highlighted Hashem Yireh. So as we see in verse 8, it says Elohim Yireh, which is denoting judgment. And later in verse 14, how Abraham called the place Hashem Yireh, which denotes mercy. So we see how judgment is being transferred or sweetened to mercy. Some versions will say Hashem will provide for himself. And as it says, Elohim Yireh can really mean, the word provide can be seen as actually Yud-K Vav-K will be seen. And Yud-K Vav-K transcends the world and can't be seen in the lower world. And the only way Yud-K Vav-K can be seen in this world is to descend and fill the world as the vessel of Yud-K Vav-K known as Elohim. The gematria of the concept. So here I have actually Hateva, nature. Elohim equals 86. Yamaleh, which means to Hashem fills the world, equals 86. Hateva, nature, is 86. And Kli of Yud-K Vav-K, Kli of Hashem, the vessel of Hashem, equals 86. And the secret of this level of revelation in the physical world is the concept of MASHIAC. For the gematria of Yud-K Vav-K will be seen as Elohim is exactly 358. Let me explain. So here, instead of writing out the name of Hashem, I put 26, Yireh. Hashem will be seen is the numerical value 242, Elohim, as Elohim. So 86 plus the Lamed is 30, which equals 358, which can be 242 plus 116 is 358, the same numerical value as MASHIAC. And Yud-K Vav-K is only seen after Abraham sacrificed his son Yitzhak in the same counterintuitive manner that Yud-K Vav-K was seen. So was the command to sacrifice Yitzhak as an offering, which prefigures the eventual sacrifice of MASHIAC by God. And the gematria of and he offered Yitzhak and he revived in gematria is exactly 358. The gematria of Mashiach. So the words, and he offered Yitzhak and he revived, I wrote it out here in Hebrew, Ve'al Yitzhak V'chi equals 358. And if we were to actually substitute Mashiach for Yitzhak, as hinted, the gematria is transformed to 508, which is the exact gematria of Yitzhak, son of Abraham. As it says here, Ve'al Mashiach V'chi Yitzhak ben Abraham equals 508. And this comes to reveal that the sacrifice of Mashiach is indeed the original plan of God from the beginning, which has been concealed in Torah as the binding of Yitzhak. What's more amazing is even the Zohar and the sages say that that Yitzhak literally died and that he did resurrect. And so this is just a more further clue, remez, to the Mashiach. The sages even say that Yitzhak even atoned for Israel. Now, what's more interesting is Yitzhak. The numerical value of the name Yitzhak, I have spelled here with my messy writing, equals 208. And when you spell out Yitzhak in full, the Malui, so you take the Yud, Vav, Daled, Zadi, Daled, Yud, Chet, Yud, Tav, Kuf, Vav, Fe. When you actually spell out the Malui, it equals 728, which is the same gematria as Chaim Makar Hamavis, life after death, equals 728. Now, if you were to take 728 and minus the normal spelling, numerical value of Yitzhak, 728 minus 208 equals 520, which is Mavis B'chaim, which means life and death, is the same numerical value, 520. Now, I'm not going to go through his entire blog. I'll put it in the description of my video so you can finish reading the amazing concepts and gems that he's dropping in this Parsha. But just one other thing, my own studies, when we read about the binding of Yitzhak, it's interesting because Abraham, it says in Bereshit chapter 22, verse 4, on the third day, Abraham raised his eyes and perceived the place from afar off. And the third day is Bayom Hashlishi, which is the numerical value 713, which is also the numerical value for resurrection is discernible. And Abraham, he says to the young men, stay here with yourselves with the donkey, while I and the lad will go yonder, and we will worship, and we will return to you. Abraham was confident that Yitzhak was going to come back with him. Who are these two young men? Rashi says these two young men were Ishmael and Eliezer. And Ishmael was hoping that Yitzhak wouldn't come back so that he could receive the firstborn inheritance. And so, not only this, but on the third day, it was actually a 4-day journey to where Yitzhak was to be bound and slaughtered. And 4 days, well, what else about 4 days? Well, when we read about the Pesach offering the children of Israel in Mitzrayim, and how they had to, Hashem commanded the children of Israel to take a lamb on the 10th of Nisan. They were to tie it to their doorposts and wait 4 days before being offered. The 4 days before being offered was to make sure that there was no blemish and that this was not a spur of the moment crazy thing, but a very calculated move into slaughtering the lamb. It's interesting as Yeshua in the Gospels actually comes out riding on a donkey 4 days before he is bound to the cross. And not only that, the Midrash Rabbah actually explains how Abraham took the wood for the offering and placed it on Yitzhak, his son. It says, why did Abraham not take the wood by himself or take the donkey with him to the mountain to carry it? Why did he make a point of making it Isaac carry it? And this is what the Midrash says. It says this is one who carries a stake for his own execution on his shoulder. And not only that, in the footnotes, it says when the secular courts executed someone by hanging or crucifixion, they first forced him to carry the stake to the site of the execution. That sounds familiar. It says, so too Abraham had Yitzhak carry the very wood that was going to be used to burn him. It's interesting because, well, let's carry on. It says, the Yefa Toar explains the purpose of having the condemned person carry his stake to the execution site was in order to make known that he was heading for execution. Abraham, too, wanted to let Yitzhak know that he was going to be sacrificed, but he did not wish to tell him directly. He therefore put the wood on Yitzhak's shoulders so that he would understand that the wood was for him. Not only that, Mashiach is also described as a carpenter, and it may have been very possible that Yeshua himself carved his own cross that he was going to carry. What's more interesting is when the ram is provided and everything's done, we see that who comes back down the mountain in verse 19? Abraham returned to his young men, and they stood up and went together to Beersheba. And Abraham stayed at Beersheba. No mention of Yitzhak anywhere. And in the following Parsha, the upcoming Parsha, it's Parsha Vayiera, and we see that Sarah dies and Abraham bewails her, to eulogize her, and still nowhere is Yitzhak found until we flip a few pages in the Parsha all the way to chapter 24, verse 62, and then it says, now Yitzhak came from having gone to Beer Laharoi, for he dwelt in the south country. And it says, and Yitzhak went to supplicate in the field towards the evening, and he raised his eyes and saw, and behold, camels were coming. And it's really interesting that he decides to show up way over here. And this is where the sages say that Yitzhak really did die and resurrect. And this is why he didn't even return from the mountain with Abraham. You can understand that or interpret it however you like. You don't have to agree. But even if you don't agree and you support Yeshua as Mashiach, if you think it's a made-up story, well, it only strengthens the case that the Mashiach is to die and rise again. And on that note, have a great week. Shavua Tov. Be blessed.